Swapārera Apyamushmin Nayadrikeshayasya Kritatmanamam Kritatmanam Mahatmanam Vaha Prachura Samagamaha. Sang Prabhu, can you read the translation?
Yes. King Raghuna said, "This birth as a human being is the best of all. Even birth among the demigods in the heavenly planet is not as glorious as birth as a human being of this earth. What is the use of the exalted position of a demigod? In the heavenly planets, due to profuse material comforts, there is no possibility of associating with devotees."
So these set of verses are the king appreciating his good fortune, and he appreciates various good fortunes that he has. So the first good fortune that he's appreciating is that he has a human form of life, right? So he gives 4 reasons of why he's appreciating the human form of life. Firstly, he says that the devas become bewildered by too much opulences. And that's one difference, that in the heavenly kingdom, the senses of the demigods are very powerful. And the opportunities to enjoy the senses are also very potent. So with this combination, the devas, they become bewildered by too much of opulences. In the material world, there is a mixture. While there is opportunity to enjoy, there is also suffering. For instance, the devas, they never fall sick, right? And basically they live their entire lives and they die, right? So they don't have old age, they don't have sickness. In the human form of life, there is old age and sickness and impending death. So all this goes to develop detachment. Then even when the person is enjoying, that enjoyment is very limited. There is only so much they can eat, so much they can drink. After that, they become satiated or they become sick. So there is a healthy mixture of also of enjoying, but not becoming too absorbed in the enjoyment. So Raghuna, first he appreciates that. Then second and third are kind of flip of one another. The second is, he says that the demigods, they do not have an opportunity to associate with devotees. Whereas in the human form of life, there is an opportunity to associate with devotees. Now, does not mean that there are no devotees in the heavenly kingdom, right? We know Narad Muni wanders in the heavenly kingdom, and in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it's also mentioned how Indra, he is constantly performing yajna to please the yajna purush, and how the Lord will sometimes personally appear to accept the oblation, something that is rarely done in with the humans. The difference, however, is the extent of association and the level of mercy. And so, when Srila Prabhupada decided to come to America, One of the reasons that he came was that the most needed help was over here. Same reason Bhaktisiddhanta was saying, go to the West, go to the West. One of it was because India was following the West. The other was the West needed the help the most. They were materially opulent but spiritually depleted. So similarly, in general, in the human form of life, because there is this suffering, because there is this awareness of suffering, the devotees also come to give mercy. Just like in Tirtha, in the holy places, the saintly people, they don't come to take bath or to pay obeisances, even though they may do that. But that's not the primary reason they come. They come to holy places because those who are sinners come to holy places, or those who are aspiring transcendentalists come to the holy places in the hope of either getting relief from the suffering or in the hope of getting spiritual answers. So that's why even the devotees congregate at the holy places. So similarly, in this earthly planetary system, because there is this suffering, there is this questioning, there is this desire to make spiritual progress that is much stronger, then the devotees also come in larger numbers to reciprocate with that need. And the king, he describes the devotees as Rishikesa Yasha Kirtamanam Mahatmanam Va Prachura, whose whole being is composed of glorification of the Lord. So this is the opportunity that is available in the human form of life to associate with people whose very essence is glorification of the Lord. They don't belong to the material world, but out of mercy they come. And how special are they? So the king says that Rishikesya Yasha, the Rishikesya Krishna, Yasha is the fame, Kirta Manam, that they sing, Mahatmanava Prachura. That is their essence. So Prabhupada writes that the human birth is a great opportunity for self-realization. One may take birth in a higher planetary system of demigods, but due to the profusion of material comforts, one cannot gain release from material bondage. Later, he says, by such association, one can gradually become detached from material attraction of money and woman. Money and woman are the basic principles of material attachment. Mahaprabhu therefore advised that those who are actually serious about returning back to a Godhead should give up money and women in order to be fit to enter the kingdom of God. Okay, verse 22. Nahe adbhutam tvacharnam jarenubhi hatam shabhakti adok saje mala mahurtikadayasya samagamaachame dustakamulo pato vivekaha.
It is not at all wonderful that simply by being covered by the dust of the lotus feet, one immediately attained the platform of pure devotional service to Adoksaja, which is not available even to great demigod like Brahma. By associating with you just for a moment, I'm not free from all argument, false prestige, and lack of discrimination, which are the roots of entanglement in the material world. Now I'm free from all these problems.
So, previous verse, the king he had first glorified the human form of life, and while glorifying the human form of life, he glorified Vaishnava Sangha, association with devotees. So that was a general principle. Now he talks about his own good fortune, that how has he benefited by it. So he talks about his own association with Jat Bharat. Now, previously he spoke about intimate devotee association, that that the birth of the human being is best of all. Even birth among the demigods is not glorious. Why? Because there is no possibility of associating with devotees. Now, Jat Bharat might say that what you are speaking about is intimate devotee association, which means being very close to a devotee for an extended period of time. So the king, he's addressing this implicit thought that may arise in Jat Bharat and saying, no, there is no need for an extensive intimate association, right? So in doing so, he's further glorifying devotee association, and specifically he's glorifying his association with Jat Bharat. So he says that even a moment's association with you is sufficient to help one attain pure devotional service. Right? So he's saying that one does not have to have extended, intimate association with devotees. Look at me. I just had, now it was a little bit more than a moment, but essentially, it is within the perspective of the span of a lifetime. It was a very short conversation they had. After this conversation, Jat Bharat leaves and goes away, and the king never sees Jat Bharat again. But he's saying it doesn't make a difference. That only a moment's association, I am now freed. Vishnu Chakravarti says that he's saying that now I am freed of all argument, false prestige, and lack of discrimination, right? So these are the three things, he says, that have happened to me. So, so the point that he makes while reflecting on himself, that I was argumentative, and he kept pointing out to refute some of the points that Jat Bharat was making, that the soul is affected by the bodily discomfort. Then before that, false prestige, right? False prestige. As a king, he was chastising him. Lack of discrimination, right? Was not able to distinguish between the fact that his own position was temporary and external. It did not give him the right to chastise others. Lack of discrimination about the position of devotees. So he is reflecting on himself and saying that just a moment's association with you has given me these three things: free from argument, free from false prestige, and I have been liberated from lack of discrimination. So these statements, they reflect wonderment, awe and enthusiasm of the potency of devotee association in the king. Right? So he's speaking in wonderment, that how wonderful is the Vaishnava Sangha, that just a few moments I've spent with you, and my whole life and many lifetimes I've been corrupted with material life, pride. For many, many years, I was proud of the little knowledge that I had. And look at me, now I have become favorable to Bhakti. So there is this sense of humility, that he is belittling himself, perhaps a bit too much, but out of humility he is doing it. And there is also this sense of wonderment that somebody like me has been cured just by a few moments association with somebody like you. So Prabhupada says that association with pure devotees certainly frees one from the material clutches. This is certainly true for King Raghugana's association with Jat Bharat. The king was immediately freed from his misgivings of material association. The argument offered by pure devotees to the disciples are so convincing that even a dull-headed disciple is immediately enlightened with spiritual knowledge. And this Prabhupada is speaking from personal experience. And when he was initially and even later on, when he was preaching, then the people that he was preaching to came from many different conceptions. In the West, they came from a more hedonistic view, that enjoyment, material sense gratification, or some of them had these imaginary views of merging with one and enjoying through intoxication. When Prabhupada was preaching in East in India, then all this sense of all gods are the same, all paths lead to the same, karma is supreme. And when Prabhupada would speak from the scriptures, and then he says that there is immediate enlightenment. And some of the people who attended Prabhupada's lectures, they made a very similar point. They said that when Prabhupada spoke, everything seemed to make sense. The problem was that when they went later on, then that effect would not last for a long time. They said, but when we were sitting in the class, Prabhupada was speaking, things are very, very simple. There is Krishna, there is use of Krishna, go back to Godhead and this material life. What's the problem? Just chant. So it made beautiful sense because of its simplicity. I was talking to one of Prabhupada's disciples in a temple, and he was sharing this, that Prabhupada's lectures, they were simple and straightforward. Right? He did not go into a lot of, now we see a lot of that happen, and not necessarily a bad thing. We see a lot of metaphors being explained, a lot of nuances, commentaries from other acharyas. And that's because the audiences also become more sophisticated, so to cater to their, fulfill their desires. Prabhupada lectures were simple, a common theme that was repeated over and over again, and made sense. But the problem was that when they went away from the lecture, this disciple was saying it would last with him for a while, but then he would forget it. Right? And then they try and listen to the lecture again, and they would go through the same cycle. Okay, moving on to verse 23. Namo Mahabhyo Stu Nama Shishubhyo Namo Yuvabhyo Nama Tubhya Ye Brahmanagama Vadutalingas Charanti Tebhya Shivamastu Rajanam.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto the great personalities, whether they walk on the earth's surface as children, young boys, avadutas, or great brahmanas. Even if they are hidden under different guises, I offer my respect to all of them. By their mercy, may there be good fortune in the royal dynasties that are always offending them.
So we see these two emotions coming side by side in the king. At one point, there is gratitude, and the other point there is remorse. Why remorse? Because before he understood the position of Jadbharat, he had behaved offensively towards him. And so his concern is that if I had not met Jadbharat, then my life would have been useless. But when I met him, I offended him. And now he talks not only about himself, he says that may there be good fortune in the royal dynasties that are always offending them. Right? So same thing he is saying can happen to other kings and is happening to other kings. So the change in his own situation is only because of the mercy of Jadbharat. That when the king had offended Jadbharat, Jadbharat could have walked away, or he could have rectified his behavior from a material perspective, or he could have cursed. So he could have done many things, but he did not. He patiently engaged the king in a discussion, enlightened him, and then took him to the path of emancipation. Right? So he's saying that only by their mercy, because he says that the people like me, they will always engage in offensive behavior. So only by the mercy of people like you is there any hope for them. Okay? And he talks about great personalities that walk on the earth's surface as children. So is there an example of great personalities walking like children?
The four Kumaras.
Four Kumaras, very good. Then young boys,
Prahlad Maharaj.
Prahlad Maharaj. Avadutas,
Nityananda Prabhu.
Nityanand Prabhu, Sukadev Goswami, Jadbharat himself, Rishabh Maharaj, and great Brahmanas like Srila Vyasadeva, Narad Muni. So in this way, the devotees of the Lord, they walk the surface of the earth, showing mercy to even those who are offending. The Prabhupada says that King Rahugan began to offer his respectful obeisances unto them so that the offensive royal dynasties might not glide down into a hellish condition. If one offends a great personality, the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not excuse them, although the great personalities themselves might not take offense. Right? So here Prabhupada is talking about Vaishnava Uprat. And King Amrish's example is given. Durvasha offended him, even though Maharaj Amrish did not take offense, even though in terms of stature, Maharaj Amrish was a Kshatriya and a Grihastha. Durvasha was a Brahman and a sannyasi. But the fact that he was a devotee of the Lord did not tolerate the offense. And only when Durvasha begged forgiveness, then the offense was mitigated. Okay. Moving on to the next verse. So that's the end of the glorification by the king. Right? He talks about the benefit of the human form of life, the potency of devotee association, the mercy of the devotees to forgive the offenses of those who have offended them, and ends with his own obeisances unto great personalities like Jadbharat. And he gives a cross-section of the great personalities like the four Kumara, Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruv Maharaj, Sukadeva Goswami, Rishabdev, Narad Vyas. And now Sukadeva Goswami speaks. Shri Sukvacha. Okay, so I won't read this verse, it's mostly in prose. We can just go to the translation from it.
Sukadeva Goswami continued. My dear king, O son of Mother Uttara, there was some wave of dissatisfaction in the mind of Jadbharat due to his being insulted by King Rahugana, who made him carry his palanquin. But Jadbharat neglected this, and his heart again became calm and quiet like an ocean. Although King Rahugana had insulted him, he was a great Paramsa. Being a Vaishnava, he was naturally very kind-hearted and therefore told the king about the constitutional position of the soul. He then forgot the insult because King Rahugana pitifully begged pardon at his feet. After this, he began to wander all over the earth just as before.
So this is a very interesting verse. It reveals some subtle aspects of devotees and interaction with devotees. So the first point that we see is that Sukadeva Goswami notes that there were some waves of dissatisfaction in the mind of Jadbharat. Now, what this shows is that even great personalities experience negative emotions on being mistreated. So, greatness does not mean being devoid of emotions. Right. So, a lot of the focus towards the end of the second chapter and throughout the Bhagavad Gita, at least, Krishna, one of the things he emphasizes on is the importance of being equipoised, not reacting to positive and negative, not being affected by good or bad. What does that mean from an experiential perspective? Does it mean that the person now becomes devoid of emotions? That if somebody comes and insults the person does not feel any emotion, or somebody comes and glorifies, the person does not feel any emotion. Who would like to become a person like this? No one. Because the same emotions are also the fountainhead of love and happiness. The same emotions are also the connecting bridge to spirituality. That if a person says, I do not feel any happiness, then why will he chant? Right? So lack of emotion is voidism. And voidism is not Vaishnavism. Right? Vaishnavism is being full of emotions, like Anandamai, full of emotions. So the point that is made here is that the greatness of these persons is that not that they do not feel negative emotions, but the fact is that they do not unduly act on the negative emotions. Right? So we see here that Jadbharat, he had waves of dissatisfaction when the king had insulted him. But then 3 reasons are given that he did not act upon them. He said that Jadbharat, King Sukadeva Goswami gives, he said that Jadbharat was a great Paramhamsa, great devotee. Right? Second, being a Vaishnava, he was naturally very kind-hearted. So when a child is disobedient to the mother gets angry at the child. But the mother will never develop any ill feeling towards the child. Right? The mother will not say, you're an angry child, may something bad happen to you, or even in the mind think negatively. So there's the difference between the what is there in the heart. So the Vaishnavas, even when they're offended, because they're kind-hearted, they still want the benefit. And the third is that Sukadeva Goswami says that the king very quickly and pitifully begged pardon at his lotus feet. Okay. So, especially when the offending person is regretful, then the Vaishnavas, they're very quickly ready to move on. In fact, not only do they move on, they now become their well-wishers. And so, Srila Prabhupada says that a pure devotee has all the qualities of a sadhu. That Bharat is an example of it. Due to his material body, his senses were certainly agitated when he was insulted by the king, but due to the king's humble submission, Jat Bharat excused. Right? So forgiveness is a very intrinsic quality of devotees. That when the other person is seeking forgiveness, then they will very, very quickly forgive the person. And from our perspective, this also shows the importance of immediate and genuine regret and repentance when we do something offensive. So the king is a example of that. That because of his genuine regret, he was able to convert an unfortunate situation into the most fortunate situation. So if the king had not regretted, then he would be forever contaminated with the sin of Vaishnava Aparadha. He would lose his material opulences. There would be no hope for him to make any spiritual advancement. That was one path that he could have followed. But because he quickly, spontaneously, and genuinely regretted, the situation changed. Right? So, the importance here is not only feeling regret, but also two things: expressing it and doing it immediately. Why immediately? Because it opens the heart of the person that you have offended. And so having established the fact that even advanced devotees feel negative emotions, the longer that it will simmer in their hearts, the more it will trouble them, and the more you are culpable for troubling them. So one should immediately express regret. The second reason is that if one does not express regret immediately, then the nature of the mind is that it will justify that action. That the person mind will say, yes, you did that, but there were mitigating conditions, there were extenuating circumstances. And actually, he's a great devotee, so he should probably not even feel anything. If he's feeling something, that means he's not a good devotee. Then in any case, there's nothing for me to worry about. So the mind will play what the mind does. So we see that example of Rupa Goswami when he lost his taste for chanting. And Sanatana Goswami says that he laughed at this Vaishnava. He did not lose any moment. He immediately went to him and apologized. Right? Rupa Goswami could have gone through many mind games that actually I was not laughing at him. I was closed, I had my eyes closed, and I was thinking of a humorous Radha Krishna Leela. He said, when your chanting before becomes pure, then from now comes Roop and Roop comes Guna and Guna comes Leela. The Rupa Goswami was at the level that he was able to enter into the Leela of Krishna through the process of chanting. And so he could have said, well, I was doing Leela Smaran and I did not even look at him. It's his problem that he was laughing. My eyes were closed. He did not think like that. He did not lose any moment, went and begged his forgiveness. And of course, what did the other Brahman do? Not only did he forgive him, he blessed him also. Right? He said, no, I'm sorry. All good fortune to you. So this is a valuable lesson in terms of dealing with Vaishnavas. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also notes that this verse may stir strong emotions in Maharaj Parikshit, because Maharaj Parikshit had also offended a Brahman. He had placed a death snake around the shoulder of Shamik Rishi, and he was cursed by his son, another Brahman, Shringi. So Maharaj Parikshit might get agitated that I am also an offender. I offended Shamik Rishi, I offended Shringi. So understanding the mind of Parikshit Maharaj, we see that Sukadeva Goswami starts with Ityevam Uttara Mata. So he addresses Maharaj Parikshit as one whose mother is Uttara. Why? Because he is reminding Parikshit Maharaj that the Lord entered into the womb of your mother to protect you from the Brahmastra. At that time, he showed you his four-handed form. And that is why you were named Parikshit, because when you were born, Parikshit means to examine. So you were examining everything around you to discern that beautiful form of the Lord that you saw in the womb of your mother. Then the Lord sent you sages like Narad Muni and me, Sukadeva Goswami says, and me, to protect you from the curse of the Brahman. This means that the Lord himself has nullified the curse of the Brahman, not once, but over and over again. So the Brahmastra is considered to be the curse of Ashwatthama. And the Lord nullified the weapon, and the Lord nullified the offense to Shamik Rishi by allowing him to drink the nectar of Bhagavad. So this shows that you are not like the king. You are much more fortunate than King Rahugana. You are much more fortunate than even Jat Bharat. You are much more fortunate than even the great sages. Therefore, you have no reason to lament. So, Chakravarti Pad chants this, essentially he chants the Uttara Mata, right? And he brings forward both the hidden regret that surfaces in the mind of Parikshit Maharaj, and also how through the words that Sukadeva Goswami is using in this verse, he is reassuring Maharaj Parikshit. And the assurances of Maharaj Parikshit about Sukadeva Goswami, they're factual. So he's not unnecessarily glorifying the king or flattering him or simply trying to pacify him. He's factually saying that, yes, you had the curse of Ashwatthama, but the Lord protected you. You had the curse of Shamik Rishi, but the Lord protected you by sending me. The curse is like a poison, but the Lord has given you the nectar of the Bhagavatam through me. So we see this very beautiful, loving relationship between a guru and a genuine disciple. So a guru is at one point very hard on the disciple. Right? Prabhupada would say that the word guru means heavy, that the guru is heavy with knowledge, the guru is heavy with chastisement, and all that is true. The guru is also heavy with love and compassion. And so earlier on in the fifth canto only, when Sukadeva Goswami, he was describing the dynasty of Bharat Maharaj. He speaks about the appearance of Rishabdev. And that also he discerns that Maharaj Parikshit is feeling despondent because the Lord never appeared in his dynasty. Right? So if you look at the dynasty of the Kurus, the Lord does not incarnate there. So Parikshit Maharaj may be feeling that I belong to such a fallen dynasty that he simply does not come in mind. He has come in so many other dynasties, in so many forms, and Rishabdev being an example, appearing in the dynasty of Bharat Maharaj. So Sukadeva Goswami at that time, he consoles him because right after saying that, he says that, but for the Pandavas, Krishna was much more closely connected to them than to the members of his own family. Right? And he says he was more concerned about the Pandavas, spends more time with the Pandavas, acted more intimately with them, was their friend, the Sakha, the servant. He does not say all this in verses, these are what the acharyas explain. But Sukadeva Goswami, he once again consoles the king. So that's the sweetness of this guru-disciple relationship. That at one point the guru, he is with a firm hand guiding the disciple. But that strictness does not mean that the guru is indifferent to the suffering of the disciple. In fact, the opposite. And Sukadeva Goswami was an avadut. Right? At one point, he was completely absorbed in the Brahman. But we see that even he is lovingly reaching out to reassure his disciple. So, another thing to note over here is that after this conversation, as I mentioned, Jat Bharat, he immediately left the scene and continued to wander. So this is also an important principle of association between personalities with different levels of realization. So Jat Bharat was advanced and acting as a guru. The king was receiving instruction in the mood of a disciple. So excessive personal association between a guru and a disciple is not recommended, mostly for the protection of the disciple against developing undue familiarity with the guru and thus leading to offenses. We see the same thing that when Narad Muniji instructed Dhruva, he instructed and went away. He didn't say that, let me just hang around and spend some more time with you, even though he had a lot of affection. Same thing when he instructed Mridari, Prahlad, even when he instructed Srila Vyasadeva, who was almost his peer. He instructed him and went away. We see that when Angira instructed Chitraketu, we see that when Maitra instructed Vidur, right? Long set of instructions. But after the instruction, Maitra immediately went away, got up and went away. Did not linger over there. Sukadeva Goswami instructing Parikshit Maharaj, 7 days he sat and spoke. At the end of the 7th day, almost with complete indifference, he got up and went. Why? because they wanted to two things. They wanted to protect the disciple from potential Vaishnava aparadh through extended association. And the second is, they wanted the disciple to develop this mood of Vani over Vapu. That when the Guru steps away, then the association is mostly through Vani. When Srila Prabhupada left the planet, then all this work went on with high effort, creating the tape ministry, getting all the recordings, cataloging them. Srila Prabhupada, he had that foresight. He knew that there will be a time when he will not be there. And that's why he would insist that his lectures were, initially he would insist, and it just became second nature. His lectures were recorded, his conversations during walking were recorded. He encouraged his disciples to record their realizations because of this reason, that that Vani is a lot more potent than Vapu. Vapu will always have a beginning and an end. Not so with Vani. So we see here that how the discussion of the topics of the Lord are for everyone's benefit. Jat Bharat benefited by speaking it. King Raghunatha benefited by hearing it. And Maharaj Parikshit, along with the rest of us, benefited by listening to this pastime. Right? So the benefits are deep and eternal. Okay. Let's go to the next verse. Can you read the translation?
After receiving lessons from the great devotee Jat Bharat, King Rahugana of the state of Suvira became completely aware of the constitutional position of the soul. He thus gave up the bodily conception completely. My dear king, whoever takes shelter of the servant of the Lord is certainly glorified, because he can without difficulty give up the bodily conception.
So this verse is basically emphasis through repetition. That potency of devotee association is once again glorified here. Sukhdev Goswami says, Ashrita Bhagavat Ashrita. And this is the potency of taking shelter, Ashrita, of Bhagavat Ashrita, of those who have taken shelter of the Lord. So what was the result of this Ashrita Bhagavat Ashrita? That the king gave up the conception that the body is the self. Where does this conception come from? Avidya. It comes from ignorance about the self. Where does this avidya come from? It is without a beginning. So this is the potency. That which is there for eternity, since the beginning of time, which is the result, which resulted in the king being Atmani. Atmani being oneself, having a conception that I am the body. By a brief moment of association with the devotee, it went away. Right? So at one point we have this ignorance that has been rooted in one. It's like one has been sick for millions of lifetimes. And then somebody comes and spends a few minutes with this patient, and the person is cured. So that is the potency of devotee association. So Prabhupada quotes Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastra Kaya, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha Sarva Siddhi Haya. That even if the association with the devotee is a short one, it can help one attain perfection. And Prabhupada says, it has been our practical experience that the first instruction of a spiritual master infused us with Krishna consciousness, so that now we are at least on the path of Krishna consciousness and can understand the philosophy. Right? So we see the humility of Srila Prabhupada, and he still considers himself to be walking the path of Krishna consciousness. And whereas his disciples consider him to have perfected Krishna consciousness, but he's giving all glories to his Guru Maharaj. And factually speaking, that the interaction was very brief. Right? Srila Prabhupada or Abhay Charan, his friend said, let's go, there is a sadhu. And then Prabhupada said, I was a little hesitant because there were a lot of fake sadhus, but somehow he went. And then when he heard, then he was amazed. And Bhaktisiddhanta looked at him and said that, oh, you're well educated, you speak good English, so you should preach to the Western world, should write books. And Prabhupada was a little surprised that for a person who had basically was married, who was looking to improve his material condition. But that instruction stayed in the heart of Prabhupada. Prabhupada actually, after that, between that time and taking initiation, 11 years had passed. But the Vani stayed. Even though Vapu went away, the Vani stayed, right? And what was the result of that? Prabhupada says that there are many devotees engaged in the Krishna conscious movement, right? So Prabhupada is giving glories to that instruction that has had an tsunami effect. That one instruction from a liberated soul is now bearing this fruit. Okay, we now reach to the last verse of the chapter.
King Parikshit then told Sukadev Goswami, my dear Lord, O great devotee sage, you are omniscient. You have very nicely described the position of the conditioned soul, who is compared to a merchant in the forest. From this instruction, intelligent men can understand that the senses of a person in bodily conception are like rogue and thief in that forest, and one's wife and children are like jackal and the other ferocious animal. However, it is not very easy for the unintelligent to understand the purport of this story, because it is very difficult to extricate the exact meaning from the allegory. I therefore request Your Holiness to give the direct meaning.
So now, so we see how the devotees work together to deliver the conditioned soul. Right? So Jat Bharat instructed the king and delivered it. King Parikshit is now taking shelter of Sukadeva Goswami. That if you can explain this allegory to me, I can understand the meaning better. Right. So now we see that Sukadeva Goswami will churn the instructions of Jat Bharat. So Jat Bharat speaks his allegory in 20 verses. Sukadeva Goswami will explain it in 40 verses. So just like Sukha, it said, like a parrot makes the mango sweeter by eating it. So Sukadeva Goswami has digested the instructions by Jat Bharat, and now he will explain it to Parikshit Maharaj. Right? So Parikshit Maharaj asked for Anukalpena. Anukalpena means that give me further clarification on the allegory about the merchant in the forest. Right? And this becomes the topic of the next chapter. So Prabhupada says that there are many stories and incidents in Srimad Bhagavatam that are described figuratively. Such allegorical descriptions may not be understood by unintelligent men. Therefore, it is the duty of the student to approach the bona fide spiritual master for the direct explanation. Right? So Prabhupada, at one point, is cautioning also that one should not try and extract meanings on their own, because the nature of allegories are that they're metaphorical. You can extract many meanings out of it. Once Prabhupada was talking to a person in Paris who was a member of the Mensa Society. Mensa Society is a society of people who IQ is above a certain level, they're considered to be in the genius level. And Prabhupada, he asked some question, Prabhupada was explaining him through an analogy. And then this person basically said, he takes the analogy and then he says, but you say that this means this, but this could also mean this. And Prabhupada said, yes, this could also mean this, but the way that I'm using it is this. So you have to accept it the way that I'm using it. Because analogies and allegories, they are specific purpose tools that are constructed by the author to explain certain facts that are either difficult to understand or in order to explain things in a more entertaining way, in a more engaging way. Like if you remember the allegory of King Puranjan, it's an entertaining story also. Now, this allegory is not so entertaining because you see this poor merchant in the forest being bitten by mosquitoes and being stolen and jackals. So it's a kind of a dark allegory. But allegories can be entertaining also. One can read the entire Puranjan pastime and enjoy it. Like he went there, he found a woman, the woman liked him, then he built the city, and then he defended the city. And once he had a quarrel with his wife, and then he tried to placate her. So it's something that people can relate to, find entertaining. But ultimately, the important thing to understand is that the allegories need to be explained by the person who spoke the allegory or by somebody who understands the mind of the person. Like here, Jat Bharat will not explain the allegory, but Sukadeva Goswami will explain because he understands the mind of Jat Bharat. So this is the end of the 13th chapter, 26 verses. Chapter is divided into two sections. The first 19 verses is the allegorical story, and the last 7 verses are the expression of gratitude by the king and the concluding remarks by Sukadeva Goswami. So let me pause over here and see if there is comments, questions.
Just one comment, Prabhu. It's all about mercy of the devotee. And even though somebody can commit offenses, but the greatness of a devotee, he does not really act upon those. He instruct for the benefit of that devotee when he has committed offenses. I mean, mercy of the devotee, what I can see from this chapter.
That is true, Prabhu. And if you look at what the king got out of it, that's what the king says. That's what Sukadeva Goswami also says. That lifetime of ignorance and a moment association with the devotee and the highest gift, which is going back to Godhead. Right? And that also in a setting where the king started off by offending. the devotee. So how much more merciful can the person? It's like you go and offend somebody, and the person responds by giving you the most valuable treasure that is in existence. Right? That's one way to kind of quantify or get a sense of the extent of the mercy of the devotees. Of course, along with this, we also see the submission of the king, because the devotee's mercy is always there, but one needs to be open to take it. So we see the regret in the king, his genuine questioning, and then ultimately his faith in the instructions. Right? So it's a two-way street. The mercy is there, and it's like Bhakti Charumaraj was saying once, right? That the mercy comes in buckets, but you need to have a bucket to take that mercy also. If you just go there with your hand, you'll get a little bit of it. All the rest of it will just, even though the devotees are pouring it out by bucketful, if you just go with your hand or go with a small spoon, that's all you get. So you need to go with bigger buckets. So we see that also with the king, that he was also ready to accept the mercy that Jal Bharat was sending his way. So thank you for the nice point.
That means we had to be grateful. I will compare the bucket like with an open heart, with a fully open heart.
Absolutely. That's what your heart should be open. And that way you can accept the mercy that is coming.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Prabhu, can I ask the question? I don't know whether it's too late now. This is a question which I've been thinking. It's a real life situation. A very good friend of mine, a devotee, initiated devotee, a lot of service. They do, husband and wife, both of them, lot of service. But the Guru Maharaj is not pleased because of something. So what would be the situation of the devotee spiritual advancement? Although they are doing a lot of service, on the other hand, they are not really very keen in solving that situation, or what do you call trying to please the Guru Maharaj for whatever reason that displeasure was there. So what would be the spiritual advancement of the devotee?
It's a very interesting question, but I can think about it, but I'd like to hear from the other devotees. Any thoughts? Go ahead, Prem Kishore Prabhu.
Yeah, what I think, Prabhu, like spiritual master comes, basically first point is he's the representative of Lord. So he knows everything, what goes on in the life of the disciple, and what is best and what is not best. We don't have those kind of eyes or knowledge even to think about.
So the point you're making is that if the spiritual master is not pleased, then the disciple should look deeper into his own conduct.
Introspect more.
Right. Very good point. Any other thoughts?
I would say, Prabhu, that the spiritual master he knows what he's doing. It's maybe a very short test for them. They have to be patient, and mercy of Guru will come back.
Yeah, sometimes it's to make the disciple hanker more. you especially see that, at least I saw that in my own life, that when I initially approached Guru Maharaj, then the mercy was just flowing. And when I took initiation and I was practicing a little bit, I had to work harder to get the same mercy. Right, and it's essentially it's like as you go in more advanced classes, you have to work harder to get the same grades. And so as you make, as the Guru sees that you're making more advancement, they continuously raise their own bar of expectation, right? And the idea is to keep in the stretch zone to keep you from being too complacent. Good point, Prabhu. Any other thoughts?
Hi, Krishna. Just yeah, I thought it was a very, very interesting question. I remember my own spiritual master, he told of a few incidents in his personal association with Srila Prabhupada. He was very close to Srila Prabhupada. He was Prabhupada's personal secretary for many, many years, traveling all over. But there was one or two incidents where Srila Prabhupada expressed great not dissatisfaction, but Prabhupada chastised him, for not coming up to the mark in terms of his service. Just like one time, he was supposed to deliver a letter, to a certain devotee. It was an important letter, and then he made a mistake and he didn't deliver the letter. And Prabhupada was unrelenting in his chastisement, for him, and to the point where he was in tears. And there was another time when Prabhupada really get heavy on him. Prabhupada, just to cut some vegetables, to cook and like that. And because he was doing it the wrong way, Prabhupada told him that he wouldn't learn in 100 years. And that was very, very heavy and shocking. And there was another time in Boston where he there was a tree right in front of the temple, and he thought that the best thing to was to cut the tree down, because for one reason or not. When Prabhupada visited and Prabhupada saw that the tree was cut down, and then he acknowledged that it was him. Again, Prabhupada was like very, very upset. Right, but all these occasions, were there where Prabhupada was definitely, expressing, all this. But then, one thing about all this is that Prabhupada will just be very, very heavy at one moment, and you think that Prabhupada held this, but it was not like that. The next moment, Prabhupada just will, as if it didn't happen, right? And in other words, what could be deduced is that the spiritual master, he never holds malice. He doesn't, want to see the disciple down, and just be so dejected that he can't perform his service. But this is necessary sometime, for the like someone said, one of the devotee just said, for the devotee to introspect and rectify himself. Because one thing is that it's explained in these texts also that familiarity breeds contempt, because he was so close to Prabhupada, right? That you become familiar. And sometimes that familiarity means that you tend to think that you can do things, you can act, freely, you can become, so sometimes the spiritual master might, very in a very calculating way, say these things, do like that, but in no way, like you mentioned, he had any hate for the disciple. It's all for the disciples' spiritual advancement. And just like you just said, we can't read the mind of a Vaishnava, we can't read the mind of a of the guru, right? But we should just introspect deeply and try to do whatever it takes to please Srila Prabhupada. And in all these incidents, as soon as these not rectify, but as soon as he began to act properly, Prabhupada just, as if these things never happened, and Prabhupada gave him the mercy, and things went on as normal. So yeah, you were speaking about Vapu and Vani. Sometimes too much close association with the spiritual master might bring about that familiarity to the spiritual master. Just does what it takes to not let the disciple become too familiar. These are some thoughts, just like other devotees were saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. I think you very nicely summarized the thoughts. And yeah, I think ultimately the guru will do whatever is for the benefit of the disciple. But if the disciple feels the disconnect from the guru, then it is incumbent on him to find out, has he inadvertently offended the guru? I know one case where so I know Nandgopal Prabhu asked the question, but he's not. He's kind of left. But maybe listen to the recording. But I know one case where a disciple was doing a lot of services, but not the services that the guru wanted him to do. So he did feel the disconnect. He went to the his guru, and said that I'm doing all this, and I feel that I'm not pleasing you. And then the guru said yes, because I would rather have you do this, which are more beneficial for you. So, so thank you for this wonderful realizations. We have about 12 minutes left, and we can start with the 14th chapter. It's a long chapter. It has 46 verses in it, and maybe we'll be able to do a few verses. Prabhupada again has like I said, Prabhupada gives the purports in the original verses, and then in the second verses he gives further purports, more amplifying the thoughts, because Sukadeva Goswami also adds his own realizations there. Like I mentioned, that Sukadeva Goswami expands on the allegory in twice the number of verses. So Prabhupada also takes advantage of the additional mercy Sukadeva Goswami is giving, and comments on that also. Okay, so so this is so we've ended with the with our 13th chapter of the 5th canto, and we can now begin with our 14th chapter. So the title of the 14th chapter is The Material World as the Great Forest of Enjoyment. And essentially, it's an explanation of the allegory. Right? There are 46 verses. The first 41 verses are Sukadeva Goswami explaining the allegorical story. And the last 5 verses is the glorification of Jat Bharat. But initially, in the previous chapter, the king glorified Jat Bharat. Here, the sages will glorify Jat Bharat. Okay, so most of these verses are actually in prose, and they're fairly long verses, and Srila Prabhupada has also blended in a fair amount of purports. So in the translation. So the translations are also very, very long translation. Right? So just to give you a heads up. So we'll start with 514. Sai Prabhu, if you can read the translation.
When King Parikshit asked Sukadeva Goswami about the direct meaning of the material forest, Sukadeva Goswami replied as follows. My dear king, a man belonging to the mercantile community, Vanik, is always interested in earning money. Sometimes he enters a forest to acquire some cheap commodities like wood and earth and sell them in the city at good prices. Similarly, the conditioned soul, being greedy, entered this material world for some material profit. Gradually, he enters the deepest part of the forest, not really knowing how to get out. Having entered the material world, the pure soul becomes conditioned by the material atmosphere, which is created by the external energy under the control of Lord Vishnu. Thus, the living entity comes under the control of the external energy, David Maya. Living independently and bewildered in the forest, he does not attain the association of devotees who are always engaged in the service of the Lord. Once in the bodily conception, he gets different type of bodies, one after other, under the influence of the material energy, and impelled by the modes of material nature, Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. In this way, the conditioned soul goes sometime to the heavenly planet, sometime to the earthly planet, and sometime to the lower planets and lower species. Thus, he suffers continually due to different type of bodies. These suffering and pain are sometimes mixed. Sometimes they are very severe, and sometimes they are not. These bodily conditions are acquired due to the conditioned soul mental speculation. He uses his mind and 5 senses to acquire knowledge, and these bring about the different bodies and different conditions. Using the senses under the control of the external energy, Bhaya, the living entity suffers the miserable conditions of material existence. He is actually searching for relief, but he is generally baffled. Although sometimes he is relieved after great difficulty, struggling for existence in this way, he cannot get the shelter of pure devotee, who are like bumblebees engaged in loving service at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Like I said, long translations. And this is essentially Sukadeva Goswami. He begins off by giving an overview. Later on, he will go analogy by analogy and explain what it means. Right now, he's giving an overarching overview, just so that one understands where this is coming from, right? So he says that that a man belonging to the mercantile community is like the conditioned soul. And then him entering into the forest for some profit is like the conditioned soul entering the material world in order to enjoy, right? And then the allegory included how this merchant is bewildered in the forest. This is like the bewilderment of the conditioned soul by the material energy of the Lord. And then living independently and bewildered in the forest, he does not attain the association of devotees. Right? And Prabhupada comments on this as being the main point that one should pay attention to. Right. So as we'll see later on, that the family members. So this chapter is very heavy, in the sense that Sukdev Goswami speaks very, very directly, not necessarily about Grihastha life, but more so about material life. He will also speak about Grihastha, especially in this context of sex enjoyment, but he's also very heavy on material life in itself, right? So, Vishnu Chakravarti says that Sukdev Goswami is lamenting that the jiva, he goes into this forest of samsara, this material world, and there his biggest misfortune is that he does not attain the association of devotees who are like bees attracted to the worship of the lotus feet of Guru, the form of the Lord. Right? So it's interesting to note that Sukadeva Goswami is glorifying the devotees as those who are attracted to the worship of the lotus feet of the Guru. And then he calls the Guru as a form of the Lord. It is interesting but not surprising, because Sukadeva Goswami, he's kind of walking the journey of the conditioned soul through the material forest. And before the person can have any hopes of emancipation, he needs to first take shelter of Guru. And through the shelter of Guru, can one get the shelter of Krishna. That's why Sukadeva Goswami does not say that the misfortune of this person is that he does not attain shelter of Krishna. He says that his misfortune is he does not get shelter of Guru. And what happens? Without the shelter of Guru, the person wanders around in this samsara with beginningless happiness and distress. Right? Happiness is so-called happiness, distress is real distress. Even distress is so-called distress. Soul does not experience distress. But he says this is beginningless, eternal, arising from the accepting and rejecting of a series of bodies. And where is the person getting the bodies? That are produced by performing auspicious and inauspicious acts. And why does the person perform auspicious and inauspicious acts? Because being conditioned by the three modes of material nature. And so he gives a succinct overview. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he kind of he takes the opposite stance to make a point. He's saying that when somebody listens to this verse by Sukadeva Goswami, then he may say that because the jiva is conditioned by Maya, then the jiva needs to surrender to Maya. And she will be the one who will free from bondage. Right? And then Vishnu Chakravarti would take, but that's not a proper way of thinking. Like if somebody is put into a prison, the warden is the one who's holding him in the prison. Now the prisoner may surrender to the warden, but the warden does not have the power to pardon the prisoner. Only the king can pardon the prisoner. So same point Vishnu Chakravarti makes is that Maya cannot independently grant liberation because she is controlled by the Lord. And he quotes 7:14 Devi Shagunmahi, Mammaya Durapya, Mameva Yupapadyante, Maya Metan Tarantite. Maybe Krishna says that this divine energy of mine is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond me. Right? And then he says that in the third line of the verse, Mameva Yupapadyante, he says that Krishna uses the word eva to indicate exclusivity. That only by Mam Prapadyante, only by surrender unto Krishna can one Maya Metan Karantite, can one cross over this material nature. One cannot surrender to Maya and cross over material nature. One cannot surrender to a combination of Lord and Maya, because then the word eva would not be relevant. So the Lord is saying, only by surrender unto me, Maya Metan Karanti Te. Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he speaks about, or re-emphasizes the importance of Guru. He says the most important information in this verse is Hari Guru Charan Aravinda Madhukara Anupadhu. And then he says, he quotes Mahaprabhu saying, Guru Krishna Prasada Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. He quotes the Vedas as Tad Vigyartam Sa Guru Eva Bigachet. Right? So he gives various quotes to show how only through the shelter of the Guru can one make advancement. And then he points back to ISKCON. I think in these verses I see a lot of that theme. And that Prabhupada keeps talking, going back to the purpose of ISKCON in helping the person get out of this material forest. Right? He says the Krishna conscious movement has been started to give an opportunity to all members of human society who are misled by foolish leaders. No one can get out of the struggle of existence, which is full of miseries, without accepting a pure devotee of the Lord. This material attempt changes from one position to another, and no one actually gains relief from the struggle of existence. The only resort is the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master, and through him, the lotus feet of the Lord. Okay, so I'll end here a little bit over time. Anybody has any concluding thoughts on this?
Just to the question that the Prabhu asked, the answer is a bit here. The Guru is right, and it's hidden in the message.
Yeah. And it will be expanded more and more. Okay, thank you, Prabhu. So we'll end over here. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya vacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you.